In the year 2025, something big happened in global trade. It wasn't a single, dramatic headline, but a quiet, powerful shift you could see in the numbers, in the prices on store shelves, and in the way goods moved around the world. It was a year that redefined the rules of commerce, and we're still feeling the effects today. So what actually happened? Starting early in 2025, the United States began to change its approach to trade. It was a significant pivot. The government expanded import taxes, or tariffs, across a huge range of products. This was a clear departure from the policies of the past few decades, which had generally aimed to lower trade barriers and make it easier for goods to cross borders. This time, the direction was different. These new tariffs didn't just target one or two countries. They affected nearly every major trading partner the U.S. has. Think about everything from electronics and clothing to furniture and car parts. Suddenly, the cost of bringing these items into the country went up. This single policy change set off a chain reaction that rippled through global commerce all year long. Businesses, consumers, and even foreign governments had to scramble to adapt. The old ways of doing business were no longer a given. Costs were changing, sourcing strategies had to be rethought, and all the assumptions that companies used for planning were thrown into question. Now, why would a government do this? Supporters of this new trade approach had a few clear goals in mind. First, they wanted to strengthen domestic industries. The idea was that by making imported goods more expensive, American-made products would become more competitive. But as with any major economic policy, the story doesn't end there. Trade adjustments always have broader effects, and these were no exception. It gets baked into the company's expenses. It was directly linked to the new costs being introduced at the border. Another defining feature of 2025 was the constant state of flux. The trade landscape wasn't static. Policies were frequently updated. A new tariff might be announced, then adjusted a few weeks later, or delayed as economic conditions changed. On one hand, this flexibility allowed the government to fine-tune its approach and respond to feedback. But on the other hand, it created a lot of uncertainty for businesses. You need to make long-term decisions about where to source your materials and how much inventory to keep. When the rules of the game are constantly changing, that kind of planning becomes incredibly complex and risky. To really understand what was going on, economists look beyond the headlines. They use specific data to measure the real-world impact. It's the average level of import duties across all goods entering the country. It gives you a bird's-eye view of the overall cost of trade. Research from the Yale Budget Lab, which tracks these kinds of economic indicators, showed something remarkable. The effective tariff rate in the U.S. increased significantly during 2025. It reached levels that hadn't been seen in many decades. And this wasn't just a temporary spike. Even as the year drew to a close, the average rate remained substantially higher than it was at the beginning. Another key area everyone was watching was the trade balance, the difference between a country's imports and its exports. But later in the year, as the new trade costs became the norm, the dynamic shifted. The gap between imports and exports began to narrow. While the monthly trade balance did improve compared to some of the earlier peaks, the overall numbers for the year still showed that trade flows were very high. We were still buying a lot from the rest of the world. Perhaps the most fascinating change, and the one that really shows how global markets work, was the shift in trade patterns. But here's the crucial part. The goods didn't just disappear. Supply chains didn't simply contract. They reorganized. Businesses are incredibly adaptable. This is a perfect illustration of how global trade networks do just break. When you put pressure on them, they bend and reroute. It's like a river finding a new path around an obstacle. So, what's the big takeaway from the great trade shift of 2025? It's a powerful lesson in how policy decisions create ripples that spread across the entire economy. It wasn't just a single story with a single outcome. It was a complex period of adjustment. We saw higher government revenue, but also higher prices for consumers. We saw challenges for businesses trying to plan, but also incredible adaptability as they forged new supply chains. The year 2025 showed us that trade is a dynamic system. When you change the cost structure, markets respond. How these new trade flows, pricing trends. It was a year that set the stage for the future of global commerce. Thanks for watching. If you found this deep dive interesting, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more analysis on the economic forces shaping our world. See you next time.